Hello and welcome to Learning Matters, a podcast for teachers brought to you by the Teacher Foundation. The series of podcasts about all matters related to learning, hence the name of our podcast, Learning Matters. In these podcasts, we will examine, discuss and debate on absolutely everything and anything related to learning. Be it policies, classroom practices, strategies, tools, research, articles, assessments, leadership, teacher well-being, student readiness, social emotional skills, catching my breath, and the list goes on. On the 23rd of December last year, the government issued an advisory. This advisory was titled Advisory to Citizens Regarding Use of Caution Against Edtech Companies. This advisory basically it emphasizes on 3 points. One is the claims that edtech companies can make or not make in their advertising. And number 2 is about the fact that edtech companies need to get explicit consent for the purchase of the service of or educational products. And number 3 is the free e-learning content or the textbook or digital labs offered by the government for all students. So this is basically in a nutshell what the advisory had. But the fact is that these guidelines have been a long time coming as I think a number of people in the education space have had apprehensions about the proliferation of these edtech companies. So what are the reasons behind this and how does it affect learning? This would be the topic of our podcast today, and to talk to us about this, we have Maya Menon, the founder and director of the Teacher Foundation. Welcome, Maya.
Hi, Sandhya.
So, Maya, I'm sure you've already gone through the advisory. So, what is your initial reaction?
Actually, Sandhya, it's because you decided to do this podcast. That's why I actually looked at the advisory. So that's a confession that I have to make. So I did go through the advisory, and it's a rather brief advisory. But when you go through it, you quickly realize it's not really much of a regulation. It's more a compliance to certain technical norms, which would be expected of all businesses. It's not necessarily because it's edtech. Yes, there's a mention of parents and children, but otherwise, these are pretty much pointers for any business. It's not necessarily for an edtech business. One thing that's glaringly missing is the discussion on what exactly is learning. And how to safeguard that complex process through this advisory for all edtech companies. That does not seem to come through at all.
Yes, I guess that is in terms of the quality of learning or the quality of their products, of the services that edtech companies are providing. I think, yes, that is certainly missing. But I'd also like to draw your attention to this, a line in the very first paragraph of the advisory, which says it has come to the notice of the Department of School Education and Literacy that some edtech companies are luring parents in the garb of offering free services and getting electronic fund transfer mandate signed or activating the auto debit feature, especially targeting vulnerable families. Now, this is like, as you said, it's not about learning, it's about almost commercializing this entire process, about raking in the profits. I don't know how that is in schools, as you said.
So this is not exceptional just to an edtech company, because that's an RBI norm and advisory that's been sent to all banks. So if you've got to renew your Netflix account, or if you've got to renew something else that you want to make a monthly payment to, now you have to do it month by month manually.
I think their concern was the fact that there were free services, free educational services that are being offered. And then the debit feature kicks in. So even if you don't want to partake of the product, you have to, sort of be lured into it.
So that is correct. So it could be a case of a lot of very anxious and aspirational parents who want the best for their child. So they give in all their details and then don't realize that the free service is over, maybe after a week or a month, and then there could be an automatic debit. But even then, there is a safeguard there, because that automatic debit can happen only, once a month. So after that, you have to manually agree to it, because that's an RBI requirement now. I also want to point the fact that, they're making education a very transactional and commercial entity. when we are looking at it from an edtech perspective. I'm not against edtech companies, not at all, but I think we are forgetting that education is essentially a connection between the teacher and students amongst themselves. It happens in a social environment. And yes, technology is great. It allows you access to a vast range of resources. But I feel the soul of education gets lost when we talk about education in this transactional way.
Absolutely. I think I agree. And also, your point about aspirational parents, the fact
Yes.
that, and why EdTech has proliferated to this extent, probably, is something I think for us in the learning space also to think about. Because many of the unicorns of the startup world, especially in India, are all from the EdTech space. You
Yes,
take
that's
Byju's,
correct.
Eruditus, Vedantu, an academy. I mean, they're all from the edtech space. So it means that there are lakhs of students, or at least these companies claim that lakhs of students have taken up their offerings. And before edtech, we had tutorials, coaching classes. I mean, we have
True.
them even now. So this brings us to the question that you are, I think you've been alluding to. That is, in terms of learning, why is that parents and students are forced to look out, and look at different avenues out of the school for exam preparation, even as early as grade 1?
I know, and this is what my daughter calls it, FOMO, fear of missing out. I think that's what it is. I think parents are just anxious. They want the best for their children. They want to make sure that their child gets the best deal in life. And usually it's a single parent home or maximum 2 children and so on. The traditional tutorials and now edtech companies are actually playing into that anxiety that all Indian parents have. Maybe there are parents in other countries also. I think South Korean parents are supposed to be also of a similar kind. And I think we are forgetting that we need to allow children to grow naturally. They need to grow making mistakes, feeling safe and secure with the love and care provided both at home and at school. Learning with rigor, learning with joy. And I think all of that is sort of getting forgotten in this mad rush. I just want to actually share an incident that happened many years ago, but it was when Teacher Foundation was still quite young, and this was one of the top schools in the country and top schools in Mumbai. And there were senior school teachers who actually came and told me, that Maya, we often wonder what is our purpose, because children come to our school only for the socialization process. And these are teachers who are teaching, grade 9, 10, 11, 12, particularly 11 and 12. And they said that most of the syllabus and most of the curriculum is completed by, the tutorials that they attend outside school hours, whether it's before school or after school. And they don't really come to learn in the school. They just come to meet their friends and have fun and play sports and so on. So in fact, it sort of highlights the fact that tutorials or even now edtech companies have become parallel businesses or parallel services to what schools are. And essentially, schools have to reclaim that space. They have let it go. We can't allow schools to just let other people take over, get into their turf, so to speak. Yes, there will always be, some level of tutorial service, but that entire idea of the traditional tuition teacher coming to your home and giving you tuition once a week or a couple of times a week, or you going to cycling to a tuition teacher and having tuition for a couple of, that notion is gone. And now we have edtech companies. So we need to start questioning what is learning, why do we send children to school, and what is the role and purpose of schools. I think we're forgetting that in this rush to help children get ahead, help children score good marks, and help children get into good colleges later and hopefully get into good jobs. And ironically, education was called the sunrise industry at the turn of the century in late 90s and early 2000s and so on, especially in a country like India, because it was a business or it was a service that would never have an economic downturn, because we have such a vast population of young people, the most number of young people under 18 in the world, who have to be educated. Therefore, education is here for several generations. And now with the unicorn industry. Edtech has become pure gold in terms of economic value. But in terms of educational value, I think it is still suspect. But parents don't realize that. It's only those of us who worked and slogged for decades in education, we realize that schools should not allow themselves to be superseded by edtech companies. They have to reclaim their position in society as an important service provider. And they're doing something which is vital, which is building human capital. That is what, and you asked the question about, exam preparation as early as grade 1. Recently, I had a relationship manager from my bank who just dropped in just to meet me. She's young and she's got 2 children. One is a baby, one is an infant, the other is just 7 years. And she says that she's been having some online classes. And she said, my husband is very worried because he's not learning enough and he's just too playful. And I said, but the child is just 7 years, let him play. As long as he's learning and as long as he's living in a safe environment, it's okay. Yes, COVID has not been the greatest boon for schools. But the fact that parents are getting worried about a child who's 6 or 7 and being a bit playful, this is the time to play, and you learn a lot through play. So I think as parents, young parents have to learn to let go, and it's hard. It's easy for me to say because now I've moved on, but I don't think I was ever in that position where I got anxious about my child and how she was doing.
But you're a minority, Maya.
Even in grade 11 and 12.
No, but that's true. I think that is as you rightly said, I think these anxieties are what other people, different out of school services are, choosing. I mean, that is what they're preying on. That's what the advisory is also saying. But I really liked what you said, as in school should reclaim their position. It's not just a place where students go to socialize. The fact is that there is holistic learning that happens in school. But I think I'd also like to then talk about the fact that after school, especially students after grade 12, they go to these competitive exams. And these exams make a lot of cognitive demands on children. There is a need for speed, there's a speed for higher order thinking, reasoning, analytical skills, deeper understanding of a concept, which is what will help them do it. So then are we at schools not able to provide these skills to children or equip them to take on these competitive?
I think that's a great question, Sandhya. It again, it's a pointer to schools to reflect on what they're doing and how they're doing what they're doing. Even schools are guilty of just getting onto the bandwagon, and it's a rat race where they're just trying to satisfy parents and make parents feel that yes, their child is getting ahead. So it's a case of completing portions, testing them, giving them good marks, sending them to the next class, and so on. So I think there is a whole movement of slow learning. This whole idea of it's like slow cooked food versus fast food. Everybody says slow cooked food and slowly cooked food is far more nutritious, far more wholesome, far more healthy. Similarly, education it takes a longer time to gestate, where they're learning skills. The new education policy of 2020 talks about critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration. NEP 2020 talks about focusing on critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration, life skills, social emotional learning. Now we can't make that happen and do the mad rush of finishing the portions and curriculum. We need to take stock, and the policy does say you can have flexibility in the curriculum, you can actually mix and match courses, etc. So what we have to do is grab that opportunity and use it to redesign education in a way that's meaningful, and we can create slow learning rather than this fast-paced way of trying to get ahead with good marks.
I think I really like what you said about slow learning, about gestating. about learning that takes time to assimilate, that where students are then thinking and reflecting, and the outcomes then of learning, that is building competency
Exactly.
in subjects then.
Exactly. Building competency, building an understanding of who you are as a person. That's important. You learn that only in those 12 to 14 years that you spend in school. Once you get out of school into professional colleges or regular colleges and into jobs, you don't have time. That is when the rat race begins. So schools are this wonderful oasis of 12 to 14 years when you can actually do so much. So, and I think that is what I would like schools to do, and that's what we've been trying to endeavor the past 20 years at the Teacher Foundation.
Absolutely. I really do hope that schools focus on these various aspects, as you've said, especially the Teacher Foundation has been talking of social emotional skills from, I think, the past 7 years, even before it became the big buzzword that it is today. And along with that include critical thinking, higher order thinking, so that they're catering to all kinds of students, all levels of students. And, and it helps students even beyond their 14 years of schooling. So which brings me to my last question, Maya. Now that you said, this slow learning, I think it's sort of an offshoot of that is probably mastery learning. People have been talking about it. So then is Edtech something, or technology rather, I wouldn't say Edtech, but technology, something that schools and learners should be leveraging? Or how can schools and learners leverage this for mastery learning, for deeper learning? Is that a good idea, number one? And if so, how can it happen?
So I think technology is a good idea. We can't do without technology. And I think these past 2 years have taught us that so much was possible, and we kept businesses and work going just because of technology. And of course, schools also, learning also to some extent, of course, it wasn't optimal at all, but so technology is, I think, here to stay. We should leverage technology in the same. So it's not very often we in education get asked about technology, but a lot of times you don't ask a doctor, what about technology and so on, because they use a lot of technology. They use technology for various, scans and tests that they have to do and so on. But that doesn't in any way take away from the fact that medicine and the medical profession is about patients, diseases, and getting to understand the diseases and understand the patients and see how they connect. And I think that's the case. Technology plays an important role. In the same way for education, also technology will play an important role. And you talked about mastery learning. I think mastery learning cannot happen in a speedy manner. Mastery learning has to happen when a same idea is visited, revisited, re-examined from multiple perspectives. That provides you a depth of understanding and a kind of mastery orientation. In fact, Teacher Foundation, as part of the Life Skills Collaborative, has actually defined what mastery orientation is. It is good for all teachers to know what is mastery learning and what would be a child's orientation to mastery learning. What is the evidence, or what is the manifestation of a child or a young person who's equipped for mastery learning. It is important for teachers to know, but that will happen only when there's time provided for the learner to engage with the teacher, for the learner to engage with the curriculum, and for the learner to engage with materials, which could also be through technology and digital tools and so on. The teacher is the binding factor there. The teacher providing the questions, the teacher providing the encouragement, the teacher doing the course correction if the child is sort of veering off somewhere else and so on.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So yes, I think if people want to use Edtech, I think they should know why they're doing so. If schools want to do
exactly. I think it's a service. It's like when you go and buy a product, you decide whether do I need it or not, and how am I going to use it. In the same way, it's not that, so-and-so's bought it, so let me buy it too. It should not be that. And I think with educational services, parents sort of go about jumping onto the bandwagon. So I think that is where parents have to sort of slow down and let children learn, grow at their own pace. Each child is different. Each child needs to be celebrated. Different children could have different kinds of disabilities. I think parents need to learn how to learn to understand their child better, rather than putting unnecessary pressure on children, which could boomerang, especially in today's day and age where we are so concerned about the mental health and well-being of children.
I think a great food for thought for all our listeners as well, Maya. Thank you so much for your wonderful perspectives on education and learning. But just for our listeners, one positive fallout anyway of this advisory that there is these Edtech companies have come together and are now talking about steps for self-regulation. Hopefully that's going to help a lot of people who want to
I hope so. I'm a bit sort of skeptical because they can tell schools also, schools can sign up for a self-regulation too. That does not seem to happen, but anyway, I'm being skeptical, but that's okay.
Thanks,
I'm optimistic for schools and children and teachers, but yeah.
Absolutely. So thanks so much, Maya, and thanks everyone for listening to this edition of Learning Matters. What did you think? Do share your comments and questions about this podcast on the Teacher Foundation app. This is a forum for all educators to exchange ideas and learning. We will be back with another podcast shortly. Till then, stay tuned.